little complicated, and it requires that little bit of background with William Wayne Justice because for you to be able to walk you through it and see how this works and how, again, the genius of the founders I cannot overstate that. We all know, all of us in this room, that God's blessed this nation from the very first day that we were created. Now, there's just no doubt about it. I mean, the fog that laid down over Washington's army and on Long Island, you know, when he's escaping from Brooklyn Heights. Did you know when David Barton, if you've never toured the U.S. Capitol with David Barton, you should do it, or at least see his tapes with wall builders. When David Barton talks about the British burning the Capitol down on my birthday, August 24th, 1815, and complete out of the blue sky, a rainstorm appears, parks over the Capitol, and pours rain until the fire goes out, parks over the White House, and pours rain until the fire goes out, and then drops hailstones the size of grapefruit, so big, so many hailstones actually killed a half dozen British soldiers. I mean, just throughout history, throughout this nation's history, there's no doubt that the hand of God has been blessing us and protecting us from day one. And that whole, I mean, this is all very, very, as I feel it and breathe it and live it. Every single day that I've got the privilege to represent you in Washington, it is as though my hair's on fire. I feel so lucky to be there and to be a part of this chain of living history that goes right back to the days of these geniuses, these men who were blessed, and women. Don't ever forget Abigail Adams, and the women always pointed out. Abigail always pointed out, if it weren't for us women, where would you guys be? And she was wonderful. You ought to get a chance to read her letters with John sometime. But I got started on this quest about the 10th Amendment with William Wayne Justice. How do we get rid of this federal judge who has controlled the prison system? Who, by the way, even though he is deceased, his courtroom still controls the construction of public schools in Texas. He is, through a permanent court order, any public school district in Texas that wants to expand capacity, if you want to add a new school, if you want to build a new high school, part of the paperwork is submitting a request to His Highness, the Eastern District Court, Federal Court, may we please, sir, expand our schools? Because our gutless, one of many gutless attorney generals in that other party, and the other gutless attorney generals, Jim Maddox, etc., signed a consent decree in a desegregation case that left the judge in control of the prisons, and it is control of the schools, and then again in the prisons, and then with our mental health hospitals. So the challenge was to figure out how to get rid of him, and I found a case that said these court orders aren't supposed to last forever. If the local government has solved the problem, then the courts are supposed to turn them loose. So anyway, to make a long story short, and I'm a lawyer by training. I was a civil defense lawyer, defended businesses and individuals that are sued. But if it weren't my legal training, I would never. This has really helped me figure this out. But this is the only way we could do it. I researched and wrote a state law, wrote and passed a state law, and then wrote and passed a federal law to win the lawsuit that I filed under the law that I wrote to win the lawsuit. As aggravating and frustrating as that sounds, that's what we're going to do to restore the 10th Amendment. Because it's going to require a full court press. We all know that we need to use every tool at our disposal. Every political, legislative, and legal tool at our disposal. But I know this model works because in order to put the federal government back in their box, it is going to take a combination not only of our initiative at the political level to make sure that the elected officials we entrust with our vote on Election Day really will keep their word, that they really will do as they promise and follow the Constitution. And we expect we're going to hold them to it like a blood oath. I mean, it is in this election more than any other. This really is the most important election of our lives. Because if we don't succeed in taking back control over the government with a constitutional conservative majority in Congress, we will become Greece very, very rapidly. I don't know truly how much more time we've got beyond this election. So we got to use every political tool at our disposal. And then by using those political tools, ensuring that we're elected by people who will keep their word and have got some backbone, then we got to be there to remind them. And I hope on the opening day of Congress, we ought to absolutely pack them all the way from the front of the Capitol down to the Washington Monument with patriots, demanding, celebrating, but making sure that every one of those new members of Congress know we're watching you.
Yeah.
We are watching you. And then the first thing out of the gate we've got to do, and when we've got a constitutional conservative majority, I'll have the joy and privilege, I'll actually be a subcommittee chairman on appropriations, which means the first thing I get to do, I'll have the joy of zeroing out all the czars. Zeroing out Obamacare. So zeroing out the Environmental Protection Agency. Who else? Well, you know, it's hard. There's lots of roaches to kill. I mean, it's got a lot of them. There's a lot of termite mounds in that city. But it is. We will start by showing up in force, by having a real tidal wave election this November, which is coming. I'm convinced of it. I feel it in my bones. The nation is with us. We're seeing things that we would not even have dreamed possible to win. We're going to win. Looks like the Republicans going to win the seat in Hawaii. In Massachusetts, who'd have thought it? And then in Western Pennsylvania. The only reason that's a competitive race, and the Democrats even in the hunt, and forgive me from even mentioning parties, because I've really done my best to eliminate it from the vocabulary, but only when it's absolutely essential. In this case, the only reason the Democrats even competitive is because he has stood up and he's promised. He said, I'll vote to repeal Obamacare, I'm against cap and tax, and I may not even vote for Nancy for Speaker. Sure. Yeah. I believe that. That's the only reason the guy's in the race. So have heart. All of us need to have heart and remember that there is a true tidal wave, tsunami building that will sweep them out in November and give us a real opportunity to elect people with backbone and courage, because that's what it's going to take, is real fearlessness and the ability to not only to stand up, because there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to be, the unions in particular. I mean, is the governor of New Jersey fabulous or what? I'm so proud of him, but frankly, I really hope that our candidate for president is somebody that has never run before. I personally like the governor of New Jersey. I think he'd be wonderful. But we need someone that nobody's ever heard of before, that's like a bolt out of the blue, dark horse. Because this is so important, it's so vitally important that we take back the country in this election. Or what we're going to see is going to be a repeat of history. And what I learned from the William Wayne Justice experience was that it is possible if you pass a state law, and then I helped write, I was in the State House, but with the help of Bill Archer, Tom DeLay, Phil Graham, and Senator Hutchison, I wrote up pieces of a law called the Prison Litigation Reform Act. You notice that in recent years you haven't heard much about prisoner lawsuits? That's because they did this in like '97, and I had the privilege of writing a piece of that. And it made it basically, unless one of these prisoners who don't have much else to do have really got, I mean, an absolutely rock solid, valid case, they can't just file all these frivolous garbage lawsuits. It just cut them off, and it stopped these permanent court orders like justices. So I know this works. You got to have a state law and then a federal law, and then you have to have the ability to go to court to sue to implement those laws. And it took me 11 years, but finally in 2002, I started in 1991. Finally, in 2002, we got a final court order from William Wayne Justice surrendering all control over the Texas prison system. And we, Texas, now run it. So this really can't be done. And we in Texas, more than any other state, are a perfect example of how and why, of how the Constitution operates, how we can use the tools that the founders gave us to restore that constitutional balance. And truly, if we don't, and you'll enjoy this book just because it's beautifully done, it's beautifully researched, and it's a wonderful illustration of what's about to happen to America if we don't get serious about this.